The sound was so soft that David almost missed it. 3 gentle taps on his apartment door, barely louder than raindrops on glass. He sat up in bed, wondering if he had dreamed it. The digital clock beside him showed 12 a.m. exactly. David Chen rubbed his eyes and listened. The tapping came again, more urgent this time but still quiet, as if the person outside was trying not to wake the other tenants in the building. He pulled on a shirt and walked to the door, his bare feet silent on the cold wooden floor. Through the peephole, he saw something that made him step back in surprise. A small figure stood in the hallway, but there was something strange about her appearance. She looked like a child, maybe 10 years old, but her skin seemed to shimmer under the fluorescent lights. Her hair was silver white and seemed to move on its own like it was underwater. David hesitated. It was midnight, and he didn't know any children in the apartment building. But something about the small figure made him feel worried rather than afraid. She looked fragile, like she might fall over at any moment. He unlocked the door and opened it slowly. The girl looked up at him with eyes that were too large for her face. They were a pale blue color that seemed to glow softly in the dim hallway light. When she spoke, her voice had a musical quality that made him want to listen carefully. "Hello, David Chen," she said in perfect English, though her words sounded formal and careful. "I am sorry to disturb your sleep, but I require assistance with an urgent matter." David blinked in confusion. "How do you know my name? Are you lost? Where are your parents?" The girl tilted her head to one side, studying him. "I live in apartment 4B next to yours. I have been observing the residents of this building for some time. You are kind to others even when they cannot help you in return. I have seen you carry groceries for Mrs. Rodriguez when her arthritis troubles her. You leave food for the stray cats behind the building." This was true, but David felt uncomfortable knowing that someone had been watching him. "You live next door? I've never seen you before. Are you new here?" "I arrived 3 months ago," the girl said. Her voice was getting quieter, and David noticed she was swaying slightly on her feet. "I have remained mostly unseen because my situation is complicated. But now I must ask for help or I will not survive much longer." David looked down the empty hallway, then back at the strange child. Everything about this situation felt wrong, but he couldn't bring himself to close the door. "She looked so weak and desperate. What kind of help?" he asked. "May I come inside? It is difficult for me to maintain this form while standing in your hallway. The energy required is considerable." The word sent a chill down David's spine. Maintain this form? What did that mean? But looking at her pale face and the way she was trembling, he stepped aside and gestured for her to enter. The girl walked into his apartment with careful, measured steps. As soon as she crossed the threshold, David noticed the change. Her skin stopped shimmering quite so much and she seemed to stand a little straighter. She looked around his small living room, taking in the modest furniture and the stack of programming books on his coffee table. "You may call me Nira," she said, settling carefully onto his couch. "It is not my true name, but it is close enough for human pronunciation." David remained standing near the door, ready to run if necessary. "Nira, I don't understand what's happening here. You're talking about maintaining forms and energy. Are you sick? Do you need me to call a doctor?" Nira shook her head slowly. "A human doctor would not understand my condition. David Chen, I must tell you something that will be difficult to believe. I am not human." David stared at her. She looked like a human child, albeit an unusual one. But as he watched, her skin began to glow faintly, and he could see patterns of light moving beneath the surface like bioluminescent fish in dark water. "I am what your scientists might call an extraterrestrial being," Nira continued. "My species crash-landed on your planet 3 months ago. Our ship was damaged beyond repair, and we were scattered across your world. I have been surviving on the ambient emotional energy produced by the humans in this building, but it is not sufficient for long-term survival." David's legs felt weak, and he sat down heavily in his armchair across from her. "Emotional energy? That's not possible. Emotions aren't energy. To humans, perhaps not. But to my people, the Lumini, emotions create very real energy frequencies. We require them to live, much as you require food and water. The complex emotions that intelligent beings produce are particularly nourishing for us." Nira lifted her hand, and David watched in amazement as soft light began to emanate from her palm. The light pulsed gently like a heartbeat, and he found himself mesmerized by its beauty. I chose to approach you because you produce the specific type of emotional energy that my species needs most, she said. Compassion mixed with wonder. Kindness that asks for nothing in return. These emotions, when freely given, can sustain us. This is insane, David whispered, but he couldn't look away from the light in her palm. You're telling me you're an alien who feeds on emotions? I prefer to think of it as sharing, Nira said softly. The light in her hand was growing dimmer. When humans experience deep connection with others, when they feel joy or love or even peaceful sadness, they produce more emotional energy than they can use. We can absorb the excess without harming the person who creates it. David noticed that Nira was looking paler again. The strange luminescence in her skin was fading, and her voice was getting quieter. But I am dying, David Chen, she continued. The energy from this building is not enough. I need direct contact with someone who is willing to share their emotions with me. Someone who can look at me knowing what I am and still feel kindness rather than fear. Why me? David asked. There are other people in this building. Mrs. Rodriguez is probably more nurturing than I am. Because you understand loneliness, Nira replied. I have felt your emotions through the walls of our apartments. You work alone, eat alone, sleep alone. You help others, but you rarely let them help you. You keep your heart guarded because you have been hurt before. David felt exposed, as if this strange being could see right through him. It was true that he had built walls around himself after his last relationship ended badly 2 years ago. I am lonely too, Nira said. My people are scattered, possibly dead. I am the only one of my kind in this area of your world. If you help me survive, I believe we could help each other heal from the isolation we both carry. David looked at this small, glowing being sitting on his couch, asking him to save her life by sharing his emotions. It should have been terrifying, but instead he felt something he hadn't experienced in months. The warm stirring of genuine connection with another living being. What would I need to do? He asked quietly. Sunlight streamed through David's kitchen window as he prepared breakfast for 2 people instead of 1. The previous night felt like a strange dream, but Nira sat at his small table, real and present, watching him crack eggs into a pan with curious attention. Your species requires this ritual every morning? She asked, tilting her head as the eggs began to sizzle. Not a ritual exactly. We need food to survive, and breakfast is usually the first meal of the day. David glanced over at her. In daylight, Nira looked more human than she had the night before, though her silver hair and pale blue eyes still marked her as something extraordinary. Food for physical energy, Nira mused. We Lumini do consume some matter for basic bodily functions, but emotional energy is what truly sustains us. Without it, our bodies simply fade away. David slid the scrambled eggs onto 2 plates and sat across from her. Tell me more about your people. Where did you come from? Nira picked up the fork he had given her and examined it carefully before taking a small bite. Her expression brightened with surprise. This has a pleasant flavor. We had similar protein sources on our homeworld, but prepared differently. She set down the fork and looked directly at him. My world was called Lumina. It was a place of great beauty, with cities that glowed like stars and forests that sang with harmonious energy. But our sun was dying, growing colder each year. The emotional energy that had sustained us for millions of years began to weaken as our people grew desperate and afraid. David found himself leaning forward, captivated by her words. The fear was the worst part, Nira continued. Fear produces a type of energy that is poisonous to us. As more of our people became terrified of extinction, the very air became toxic. We had to leave or watch our entire species die slowly. How many of you escaped? Several thousand in various ships, scattered across this part of the galaxy. My ship carried 43 others, including my parents and younger brother. Nira's voice became very quiet. But we encountered what you would call an asteroid field during our journey. Our ship was badly damaged, and we crash-landed in your planet's ocean. David reached across the table and touched her hand gently. Her skin was warm but felt different from human skin, smoother and with a subtle vibration under the surface. I am the only survivor from my ship, she whispered. The others were too badly injured by the crash. They used the last of their energy to repair my biopod and send me to shore. I'm sorry, David said, and he meant it deeply. The pain in her voice was unmistakable even with her musical accent. Nira looked up at him and her eyes began to glow brighter. You truly feel sadness for my loss. I can sense the genuine compassion in your emotional field. This is exactly the type of energy I need to survive. David felt a strange tingling sensation, like a gentle warmth spreading from where their hands touched. Is that what's happening now? You're absorbing my emotions? Only the excess, Nira assured him quickly. Humans produce far more emotional energy than they can use. When you feel strong emotions, most of that energy simply dissipates into the atmosphere. I can absorb some of it without causing you any harm. But last night you said you were dying. If you can do this, why aren't you getting enough energy? Nira released his hand and looked down at her plate. The energy must be willingly shared to be truly nourishing. When I take small amounts from the ambient emotions in this building, it is like surviving on breadcrumbs. I can live, but I cannot thrive. Without direct willing contact, I will slowly weaken until my form can no longer maintain itself. David thought about this. What happens if your form stops maintaining itself? I would become pure energy and dissipate into your atmosphere. To use human terms, I would die. The weight of her situation settled over David like a heavy blanket. This being, this person who had lost her family and her entire world, was asking him to help her survive by sharing something as simple as his emotions. How long do you have? He asked. Perhaps a week, maybe less. The process of maintaining human appearance is exhausting, and I cannot sustain it much longer without help. David pushed back from the table and began pacing around his small kitchen. This is a lot to process. Yesterday I was just a programmer who lived alone and minded his own business. Now I'm being asked to save an alien's life. I understand your hesitation, Nira said. What I am asking is not small. To truly help me, you would need to open your emotional barriers and share your feelings directly with me. For humans, this level of vulnerability can be frightening. David stopped pacing and looked at her. What does that mean exactly? How would it work? Nira stood up and approached him slowly. If you agree to help me, we would form what my people call a harmony bond. You would allow me to connect with your emotional field directly. In return, I could share some of my abilities with you. What kind of abilities? Enhanced empathy, for one. I can sense the emotions of every being within several hundred meters. You would be able to feel what others are feeling, to understand their needs and fears more clearly. I could also help you process your own emotions more healthily. David frowned. You said you could sense my emotions through the wall. What exactly do you know about me? Nira looked uncomfortable. I know you are lonely, but that you choose isolation because emotional connections have caused you pain in the past. I know you care deeply about others, but rarely let them care for you in return. You work in technology because machines are predictable, unlike people. Every word was accurate, and David felt exposed again. Have you been reading my mind? Not your thoughts, only your emotions. I cannot access your memories or private thoughts unless you choose to share them with me. I would never violate your mental privacy in that way. David sat back down and looked at this strange, glowing being who had appeared in his life. If I help you, if we form this bond, what happens then? Do you stay here forever? Do you find others of your kind? I do not know, Nira admitted. My ship's communication systems were destroyed in the crash. I have no way to contact other survivors or find others of my people. If you help me survive, I would remain here as long as you would have me. The apartment fell quiet except for the distant sounds of morning traffic outside. David realized that for the first time in years he was considering truly opening his heart to another being. The fact that she wasn't human somehow made it easier. You said the emotional energy has to be freely given, he said finally. What if I'm willing to try, but I'm scared? Will fear ruin the process? Nira's face brightened and her skin began to glow more warmly. Fear mixed with courage is one of the most powerful emotional frequencies my people know. It would not ruin anything. In fact, it would help us both grow stronger. David took a deep breath and extended his hand toward her. Then let's try. But slowly. I need to understand what's happening every step of the way. Nira took his hand in both of hers, and David felt that warm, tingling sensation again, stronger this time. Thank you, David Chen. I promise I will never take more than you willingly offer, and I will do everything in my power to give back to you as much as I receive. As their hands touched, David felt something shift inside him, like a door opening that had been locked for a very long time. 3 weeks had passed since Nira first knocked on David's door, and his life had transformed in ways he never imagined possible. Instead of eating dinner alone while watching television, he now shared meals with someone who found human customs fascinating and asked thoughtful questions about everything from salt to soap operas. The characters in this program repeatedly make choices that cause them emotional pain, Nira observed as they watched a drama series together. Yet they continue the same patterns. Is this typical human behavior? David laughed, something he found himself doing much more often lately. Unfortunately, yes. We're not always good at learning from our mistakes, especially when emotions are involved. Nira was curled up on the other end of his couch, looking much healthier than she had that first night. Her skin had a steady, gentle glow now, and her movements were more fluid and natural. The harmony bond they had formed was working exactly as she had promised. David could feel the connection between them like a warm thread linking their hearts. When Nira experienced wonder at something new, he felt it too. When he felt contentment, during their quiet evenings together, she absorbed that peaceful energy and grew stronger. "David," Nira said during a commercial break, "may I show you something?" "Of course." Nira stood up and walked to the center of his living room. She closed her eyes and held out her hands, palms upward. Slowly, points of light began to appear in the air above her palms, growing brighter and more numerous until they formed a miniature galaxy spinning slowly in the space between her hands. "This is the Andara cluster where my homeworld was located," she said softly. "Each light represents a star system. The large blue star there was our sun." David moved closer, mesmerized by the beauty of the tiny galaxy floating in his living room. "It's incredible. How are you doing this?" "Light manipulation is a basic skill for my people. We are beings of energy, so controlling light comes naturally to us." She gestured to a small red star near the edge of the cluster. "That star has planets where some of our people might have settled. And that one, and that one. Do you think any of them survived?" The miniature galaxy flickered and faded as Nira's concentration broke. "I do not know. The universe is vast, and my people are scattered like seeds on the wind. Some may have found new homes, while others may have perished during their journeys." David could sense the sadness that came with these thoughts, but also a growing acceptance. Through their bond, he was learning to recognize the subtle differences in Nira's emotional states. "You're getting stronger," he observed. "I can feel it through our connection. A few weeks ago, creating that light show would have exhausted you." Nira smiled, and David felt a warm surge of gratitude flow through their bond. "Yes, thanks to you. The emotional energy you share with me is more nourishing than anything I experienced on my homeworld. Human emotions are incredibly complex and rich." This was true. David had discovered that his own emotional life had become more vibrant since forming the bond with Nira. Colors seemed brighter, food tasted better, and even his work felt more meaningful. It was as if she had helped him remove barriers he didn't even know existed. "I've been meaning to ask you about something," David said. "Sometimes I feel like I'm sensing things that aren't my emotions. Yesterday, when Mrs. Rodriguez was struggling with her groceries, I suddenly knew exactly how much her arthritis was hurting her. And when Pete from 2A walked past us in the hallway, I could tell he was worried about losing his job." Nira nodded. "That is one of the gifts I promised to share with you. As our bond strengthens, you are developing enhanced empathy. You are beginning to perceive the emotional fields of other humans around you. Is that what you experience all the time? Feeling everyone's emotions?" "Yes, though I have learned to filter out most of the background emotional noise. It would be overwhelming otherwise. You will develop this skill as well, in time." David found this idea both fascinating and concerning. What if I don't want to feel what everyone else is feeling? What if it's too much? Then you can learn to close your empathic senses, just as you can choose to close your eyes when you do not wish to see something. I will teach you. They spent the next hour practicing emotional shielding techniques. Nira showed David how to visualize barriers around his mind that would block out unwanted emotional input while still maintaining their bond. It was like learning to tune a radio to pick up only the stations you wanted to hear. "This is remarkable," David said after successfully blocking out the anxiety coming from the apartment upstairs, while keeping his connection to Nira intact. "I had no idea this kind of thing was possible." "Your species has much more potential than most humans realize," Nira replied. "You are naturally empathic beings, But your society teaches you to suppress these abilities rather than develop them. A knock at the door interrupted their practice session. David looked through the peephole and saw Mrs. Rodriguez standing in the hallway, holding a plate covered with aluminum foil. "It's my neighbor," he told Nira. "She sometimes brings me food when she cooks too much." David opened the door with a smile. "Good evening, Mrs. Rodriguez. How are you feeling today?" The elderly woman's eyes widened slightly as she looked past David into his apartment. "Oh, I didn't realize you had company. I brought you some of my famous tamales, but if you're busy—" "Not at all," David said quickly. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'd like you to meet Nira. She's been staying with me for a few weeks while she looks for a permanent place to live." Nira appeared beside David, and Mrs. Rodriguez studied her with the sharp eyes of someone who had lived long enough to notice unusual things. "Nice to meet you, dear," Mrs. Rodriguez said politely, but David could sense her curiosity through his developing empathic abilities. "You have very interesting eyes. Are you from around here?" "I am from far away," Nira replied with a gentle smile. "But David has made me feel very welcome." Mrs. Rodriguez handed David the plate of tamales and lingered for a moment. "Well, you take care of yourself, young lady. And David, you look happier than I've seen you in months. This arrangement seems to be good for both of you." After she left, David and Nira looked at each other and started laughing. "She suspects something," David said. "Mrs. Rodriguez doesn't miss much." "She has a very perceptive emotional field," Nira agreed. "But she also cares about you deeply. She is happy that you are no longer alone." They shared the tamales for dinner, and Nira marveled at the complex flavors, while David felt her delight enhance his own enjoyment of the food. This had become one of his favorite aspects of their bond. The way shared experiences became richer and more meaningful. Later that evening, as they prepared for bed, Nira paused in the doorway of the spare room David had set up for her. "David, I want you to know that this arrangement has given me more than just survival. For the first time since losing my family, I feel like I have found a home again." Through their bond, David felt the deep sincerity of her words, along with a warmth that had nothing to do with energy absorption and everything to do with genuine affection. "I feel the same way," he replied. "I didn't realize how lonely I was until I stopped being alone." As David settled into sleep that night, he reflected on how much his world had expanded in just 3 weeks. He had thought he was simply helping an alien survive, but she had given him something equally valuable in return: the courage to open his heart again, and the skills to connect with others more deeply than ever before. Through the wall he could sense Nira's contentment as she rested, and he smiled knowing that tomorrow would bring new discoveries about what they could accomplish together. David's phone buzzed with a text message just as he was leaving work on Friday afternoon. The message from his sister Beth made his stomach drop. "Surprise! I'm in town for the weekend. Be there in an hour with takeout. Can't wait to see you." He immediately called Nira, who was at home reading one of his programming books. She had become fascinated with human technology and was teaching herself various subjects at an incredible pace. "We have a problem," David said without preamble when she answered. "My sister is coming over in an hour and she's planning to stay the weekend." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "This is the sister who lives in another city? The one you described as very observant and protective?" "That's the one. Beth is a lawyer and she notices everything. There's no way she won't realize you're not entirely human. Can you tell her I am not available? That I had to leave town suddenly?" David considered this as he hurried toward the subway. "I could, but she'll want to know everything about you. She's been worried about me living alone, and if she thinks I have a girlfriend, she'll want to meet you eventually." "Girlfriend?" Nira's voice carried a note of confusion. "You mean a female romantic partner? That's what she'll assume when she finds out you've been staying here. I'm sorry. I know that's not what we are, but it's the easiest explanation for humans to understand." Through their bond, David felt Nira's anxiety spike, followed by determination. "Then I will do my best to appear as a normal human female for the duration of her visit. Are you sure you can manage that? It takes a lot of energy for you to suppress your natural luminescence." "I will manage. You have shared enough emotional energy with me over the past month that I am much stronger now. I can maintain a completely human appearance for a few days if necessary." When David arrived at his apartment, he found Nira sitting in front of his bathroom mirror, concentrating intensely. Her natural glow had completely disappeared and her silver hair had darkened to a more typical brown color. Even her eyes had changed from their usual pale blue to a warm brown. "What do you think?" she asked, turning to face him. David stared in amazement. She looked like a completely normal human woman in her early 20s, pretty but not unusually so. Even her musical voice had taken on more typical speech patterns. "It's perfect," he said. "But how do you feel?" "Tired," she admitted. "Maintaining this illusion is like holding my breath constantly. But I can sustain it for the weekend." David felt guilty about the strain this was putting on her. But before he could say anything, they heard Beth's voice in the hallway, followed by a knock on the door. "David, open up, I've got Chinese food and a lot of questions." David gave Nira an encouraging smile and opened the door. Beth burst in with her typical energy, carrying bags of takeout and wearing the confident smile of someone accustomed to getting answers. "There's my antisocial little brother," she said, giving David a hug. Then she spotted Nira and stopped in her tracks. "Oh, hello." "Beth, this is Nira," David said, trying to keep his voice casual. "Nira, meet my sister Beth." Nira stood up gracefully and extended her hand. "I am pleased to meet you, Beth. David has told me many wonderful things about you." Beth shook Nira's hand and studied her face with undisguised curiosity. "Interesting. David doesn't usually mention having company. How long have you two been seeing each other?" "About a month," David answered quickly. "We're taking things slowly." "Smart approach," Beth said, though her lawyer instincts were clearly engaged. "Nira, what do you do for work?" David felt Nira's panic spike through their bond, but her expression remained calm. "I am between jobs currently. I recently moved to this area and am still adjusting to life here." "Where did you move from?" "Very far away. A small place you would not have heard of." Beth raised an eyebrow at the vague answer but didn't push further. "Well, I brought enough food for an army. I hope you like Chinese food, Nira." As they ate dinner together, David watched Beth subtly interrogate Nira while seeming to make casual conversation. His sister was skilled at this, but Nira handled the questions with surprising grace, giving answers that were technically truthful while revealing nothing important. "You have an interesting accent," Beth observed. "I can't quite place it." "I moved around a lot as a child," Nira replied smoothly. "I suppose I picked up speech patterns from many different places." David could feel the strain Nira was under, both from maintaining her human disguise and from the stress of deception. Through their bond, he tried to send her calming energy, but it was difficult to do subtly with Beth watching everything. The evening became more challenging when Beth suggested they watch a movie together. David chose a light-hearted comedy, hoping it would be less emotionally taxing for Nira, but he had forgotten how the shared experience of entertainment affected their bond. As the three of them laughed at the movie, David felt Nira's joy and amusement mixing with his own, amplifying both emotions. The sensation was wonderful but also noticeable. Beth kept glancing between them with a puzzled expression. "You two have an interesting dynamic," she said during a quiet moment in the film. "It's like you're sharing inside jokes without actually talking." "We spend a lot of time together," David said lamely. "We've gotten good at reading each other's reactions." Beth's tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. The real crisis came late. That night when David was helping Beth set up the air mattress in his living room, Nira had excused herself to the spare bedroom, claiming exhaustion, but David could feel through their bond that she was struggling to maintain her human appearance. "David, can I talk to you privately?" Beth asked after they finished with the bedding. They stepped into the kitchen and Beth closed the door behind them. "Okay, what's really going on here?" "What do you mean?" "Don't play dumb with me. That girl is not normal. There's something strange about her and I can tell you're hiding something big." David's heart raced. "She's just shy around new people." "You can be pretty intimidating, you know." "It's not shyness. It's like she's never interacted with humans before. And have you noticed that electronics act weird around her? My phone kept glitching during dinner, and your TV flickered several times while we were watching the movie." David had not noticed these things, but now that Beth mentioned it, he remembered similar incidents over the past few weeks. He had attributed them to old wiring in the building. "Maybe the building has electrical problems," he suggested. Beth stepped closer and lowered her voice. "David, I'm worried about you. You've been isolated for so long. And now suddenly there's this mysterious woman living with you who won't give straight answers about her background. What if she's involved in something illegal? What if she's using you? The concern in Beth's voice was genuine, and David felt torn between protecting Neera's secret and reassuring his sister. Through their bond, he could sense that Neera was listening from the other room, her anxiety growing stronger. "She's not using me," David said firmly. "If anything, she's helped me become a better person. I'm happier than I've been in years. I can see that, and I'm glad. But David, there are things about her that don't add up. Where does she work? How does she pay for anything? Why won't she talk about her family or her past?" Before David could answer, they heard a soft thud from the spare bedroom, followed by silence. David's blood ran cold as he felt Neera's distress spike through their bond, then suddenly cut off entirely. "What was that?" Beth asked. David rushed toward the spare bedroom with Beth close behind him. He knocked on the door softly. "Neera, are you okay?" No response. David opened the door and found Neera collapsed on the floor beside the bed. Her human disguise had failed completely. Her skin was glowing weakly, and her hair had returned to its natural silver color. She was unconscious but breathing. Beth gasped and stepped backward. "David, what the hell is she?" David knelt beside Neera and gently lifted her head. She was burning through too much energy maintaining the disguise while dealing with the emotional stress of deception. Through their weakened bond, he could feel her life force flickering like a candle in the wind. "She needs help," he said urgently, no longer caring about keeping secrets. "Beth, I know this looks impossible, but I need you to trust me. She's not human, but she's not dangerous either. She's dying, and I'm the only one who can save her." Beth stared at both of them, her legal mind trying to process what her eyes were seeing. "David, this is insane. She's glowing. People don't glow." "Please," David said desperately. "I'll explain everything, but right now she needs help. Can you just trust me for 5 minutes?" Beth looked at her brother's face, saw the genuine fear and care there, and slowly nodded. 5 minutes. Then I want answers to everything." Black SUVs surrounded David's apartment building at dawn, their engines running quietly in the early morning stillness. David watched from his window as men and women in dark suits emerged from the vehicles, moving with military precision toward the building's entrances. "They found us," he whispered to Neera, who was sitting weakly on his couch. She had recovered from her collapse the previous night, but the strain of maintaining her human disguise for so long had left her dangerously depleted. Beth stood near the door, her face pale but determined. After David had explained everything the night before, she had surprised him by accepting the truth with remarkable composure. "How much time do we have?" she asked. "Not much," Neera replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Her skin flickered between its natural luminescence and normal human appearance as she struggled to maintain control. "I can sense their approach. There are many of them, and they carry devices that detect energy signatures like mine." David felt panic rising in his chest, but he forced himself to think clearly. "Is there another way out of the building?" "The fire escape leads to the alley behind the building," Beth said. "But they've probably covered that too." Through the thin walls of the apartment, they could hear heavy footsteps on the stairs and the sound of doors being forced open. Someone was conducting a systematic search of the building, floor by floor. "David Chen," an amplified voice called from outside the building. "This is Dr. Amanda Foster with the Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs. We know you are harboring a non-human entity. Please come out with your hands visible and no one will be harmed." Neera struggled to stand, her legs shaking with the effort. "I will not let them hurt you because of me. I should surrender myself." "Absolutely not," David said firmly, moving to support her. Through their bond, he could feel her fear and desperation, but also her fierce determination to protect him. "We're in this together." "David's right," Beth added. "Besides, I've been thinking about this since last night. If what Neera told us is true, if there are others of her kind on Earth who are actually hurting people, then she might be the key to stopping them." Neera looked confused. "What do you mean?" "You said some lumini have been draining humans completely, leaving them as empty shells. But your method is different. You form bonds and share energy without causing harm. Maybe that's exactly what these government people need to understand." The footsteps in the hallway were getting closer. David could hear Mrs. Rodriguez's voice raised in protest as agents searched her apartment. "I cannot risk your safety," Neera said to David. "If they capture me, you might never see me again." Our bond would be broken and you would return to the loneliness you felt before. And if they capture you, you might die, David replied. That's not acceptable either. A loud knock shook David's door. Mr. Chen, please open the door. We have the building surrounded. David looked at Nira and Beth, his mind racing. Then an idea struck him. Nira, you said you can sense other luminae, right? Even from a distance? Yes, but why does that matter now? Because maybe we can make a deal. If there really are hostile members of your species hurting humans, the government will want to stop them more than they want to study you. Beth's eyes lit up with understanding. A cooperation agreement. Nira helps them locate the dangerous ones in exchange for protection and legal status. Mr. Chen, this is your final warning. Open the door or we will break it down. David walked to the door but didn't unlock it yet. Dr. Foster, I need to speak with you about a possible arrangement that could benefit both sides. Open the door, Mr. Chen. The being you're looking for is named Nira, and she's not dangerous. In fact, she might be the solution to your larger problem with hostile extraterrestrials. There was silence from the hallway for a long moment. Then Dr. Foster's voice returned, more curious than threatening. What kind of solution? Let me come out and talk to you face to face. Nira will remain here with my sister as a gesture of good faith. David, no. Nira protested weakly. If something happens to you, nothing will happen to me, David said, though he wasn't entirely sure he believed it. Through our bond, you'll know if I'm in danger. If things go badly, Beth can get you out through the fire escape. Beth nodded grimly. I can handle that. David unlocked the door and stepped into the hallway with his hands raised. He found himself facing a tall woman with graying hair and sharp eyes, flanked by several armed agents. Dr. Foster looked exactly like what David imagined a government scientist would look like. Professional, intelligent, and completely uncompromising. Mr. Chen, you are in violation of several federal laws regarding contact with extraterrestrial entities. You could face serious criminal charges. Dr. Foster, how many humans have died or disappeared in connection with these energy-draining incidents? The question clearly caught her off guard. That information is classified. More than 10? More than 50? Dr. Foster's expression hardened. Mr. Chen, I am not here to play games. Neither am I. The being in my apartment is not responsible for those deaths. Her species requires emotional energy to survive, but she's developed a method of obtaining it without harming humans. In fact, her process actually helps humans by enhancing their empathic abilities and emotional well-being. That's quite a claim. It's the truth. I've been working with her for over a month and I'm healthier and more emotionally stable than I've been in years. But more importantly, she can locate the members of her species who are actually causing the deaths you're investigating. Dr. Foster studied David carefully, and in exchange for this cooperation, legal protection for her and recognition of her right to exist peacefully on Earth. She's a refugee, Dr. Foster. Her entire world was destroyed, and she's one of the last survivors of her species. Through his bond with Nira, David felt a surge of gratitude and hope. She was listening to every word through the thin apartment door. I would need to verify these claims, Dr. Foster said after a long pause. Then let's go inside, and you can meet her properly. But Dr. Foster, she's been severely weakened by stress and fear. If your people treat her as a threat rather than a potential ally, she might not survive long enough to help you. Dr. Foster made a gesture to her agents, and they lowered their weapons slightly. 5 minutes, Mr. Chen. Then we reassess the situation. David opened his apartment door and led Dr. Foster inside. Nira was sitting exactly where he had left her, though she had allowed her natural luminescence to return. Her silver hair caught the morning light streaming through the windows, and her pale blue eyes reflected an ancient sadness that no human child could possess. Dr. Foster, meet Nira of the Lumini, David said formally. Nira, this is Dr. Amanda Foster. She's investigating the deaths caused by others of your kind. Nira stood slowly, her movements graceful despite her weakness. Dr. Foster, I am sorry for the harm my people have caused to yours. We are not naturally violent beings, but desperation can make anyone do terrible things. Dr. Foster stared at Nira with fascination and scientific curiosity. You're really not human. No, I am not. But I have learned to care deeply for humans, particularly this one. Nira gestured toward David. Your species produces the most complex and beautiful emotional energy I have ever encountered. To destroy that would be both morally wrong and ultimately self-defeating. But others of your kind don't share that view. Nira's expression darkened. There is one called Kale, who survived the destruction of our world. He has gathered other survivors around him, teaching them that humans are nothing more than livestock to be harvested. He believes that taking emotional energy by force makes it more potent. Is that true? No. Stolen energy is bitter and unsatisfying. It provides survival but no true nourishment. Those who follow Kale's path will slowly poison themselves with the fear and pain they consume. Dr. Foster pulled out a tablet and began taking notes. Can you locate this, Kale? I can sense other lumini within approximately 50 kilometers. If you allow me to accompany you, I can guide you to them. That would put you at considerable risk. Nira glanced at David, then back at Dr. Foster. Some risks are worth taking to protect those we care about. Dr. Foster looked between David and Nira, clearly recognizing the bond between them. Mr. Chen, are you willing to participate in this operation as well? Your connection to Nira might be useful. David felt fear spike through their bond as Nira realized what Dr. Foster was suggesting. You want us both to help track down the hostile lumini? I want to end the threat these beings pose to human civilians. If that requires unconventional cooperation, so be it. Through their bond, David felt Nira's mixture of hope and terror. This was their chance to prove that peaceful coexistence was possible, but it was also incredibly dangerous. We'll do it, David said, taking Nira's hand. But we work as a team and Nira's safety is non-negotiable. Dr. Foster nodded slowly. Understood. But Mr. Chen, you should know that we've tracked 17 separate incidents across the country. If Nira's information is correct, we're not just looking for one rogue alien, we're looking for a coordinated group that sees humanity as prey. The weight of that realization settled over all of them. This was no longer just about saving Nira's life or proving her peaceful intentions. This was about preventing a hidden war between two species that could destroy both. The abandoned warehouse district felt like a graveyard in the pre-dawn darkness. David sat in the passenger seat of Dr. Foster's unmarked vehicle, watching shadows move between the empty buildings while Nira concentrated in the back seat with her eyes closed. They are here, she whispered, her voice tense with strain. I can sense at least 12 of my people, maybe more. Their energy signatures are... She paused, searching for the right words. Corrupted, twisted by the pain they have consumed. Dr. Foster spoke quietly into her radio, coordinating with the teams positioned around the warehouse complex. All units, we have confirmation of multiple extraterrestrial entities in the target area. Remember, we have a friendly in our vehicle who can help distinguish between hostiles and potential allies. David reached back and took Nira's hand, feeling her fear through their bond. Over the past 2 weeks of working with the government task force, their connection had grown stronger than ever. They had located and peacefully captured 3 individual lumini who were feeding on humans, but this was the largest group they had encountered. I can feel Kyle's presence, Nira said, her grip tightening on David's hand. He is much stronger than when I last sensed him. The forced feeding has increased his power, but it has also made him unstable. Unstable how? Dr. Foster asked. The emotional energy he has stolen carries the imprint of human fear and despair. Over time, consuming such energy changes us. Kale may no longer be entirely rational. Through the warehouse windows, they could see strange lights flickering inside the building. The lights pulsed with an angry red glow that made David's skin crawl. Dr. Foster, David said, what if we try talking to them first? Nira could explain that there's another way to survive on Earth without hurting anyone. Mr. Chen, these beings have killed at least 37 humans in the past 6 months. They've drained the life force from children, elderly people, anyone they could overpower. I'm not willing to risk more lives on the chance they might listen to reason. Nira opened her eyes and looked directly at Dr. Foster. But what if David is right? What if they are killing because they believe it is their only option for survival? If I can show them the harmony bond, if they can see that willing cooperation produces better energy than forced extraction, it's too dangerous. If something goes wrong, if they attack you, we could lose our only advantage in tracking down others like them. David felt Nira's determination spike through their bond. Dr. Foster, with respect, you are thinking like a human military commander. But this is not a war between enemies. This is a tragedy between 2 species who could help each other if they understood how. Before Dr. Foster could respond, all the lights in the warehouse suddenly flared brighter, and the building's windows began to crack from some kind of internal pressure. They know we're here, Nira said urgently. Kyle is preparing for battle. He's drawing energy from all the other Luminae to make himself more powerful. All units move in, Dr. Foster commanded into her radio. Wait, David said. Let me and Nira go in first. If they see government agents, they'll assume the worst and fight to the death. But if they see one of their own people, absolutely not. I will not send civilians into a combat situation. Nira was already opening the car door. Dr. Foster, I'm not human. The rules that apply to your civilians do not apply to me. And David is not just a civilian anymore. Through our bond, he has become something new, something between human and Luminae. This was true. Over the weeks of their partnership, David had noticed changes in himself beyond just enhanced empathy. He could sense energy patterns the way Nira did, and sometimes he could even manipulate light in small ways. Dr. Foster's scientists were fascinated by these developments but couldn't explain them. Nira, if we go in there and Kale attacks us, we might not survive, David said. And if we do not try, this situation will end in violence that serves no one. David, through our bond, I have learned something about humans that Kale does not understand. You have the capacity for forgiveness and compassion, even toward those who have hurt you. If he could experience that through a harmony bond, David understood what she was suggesting. You want to offer to form a bond with Kale. I want to show him what willing cooperation feels like. The energy signature of genuine human compassion might be enough to break through the corruption he has absorbed. Dr. Foster was shaking her head. This is insane. You're talking about trying to psychically connect with a being who has murdered dozens of people. I'm talking about trying to heal a being who is slowly dying from consuming poison disguised as food, Nira corrected. Dr. Foster, your military approach might succeed in destroying the Luminae in this warehouse, but what about the others scattered across your world? Will you hunt down every member of my species? Will you declare war on refugees who are simply trying to survive? The warehouse lights flared again, and this time the concrete walls began to crack. Whatever Kale was doing in there was building to a dangerous climax. Fine, Dr. Foster said grimly. But you wear communication devices. You follow my tactical teams at a safe distance, and at the first sign of real danger, you retreat immediately. David and Nira approached the warehouse's main entrance while tactical teams moved into position around the building. The metal doors stood open, revealing a space filled with pulsing red light that seemed to move like liquid fire. Inside, they found 12 Luminae arranged in a circle around a 13th figure who was clearly Kale. The leader was taller than Nira, with skin that glowed an angry crimson instead of her gentle silver white. His eyes were completely black, and when he spoke, his voice carried harmonics of pain and rage. Sister, he said to Nira in their musical language, which David could now understand through their bond, you have brought our enemies to us. I have brought a possibility for peace, Nira replied in English, stepping into the circle with David beside her. Kale, you are poisoning yourself with stolen energy. There is a better way. Kyle laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. Better? I am stronger than I have ever been. Watch. He gestured to one of the other Luminae, and David felt the being's life force drain away as Kale absorbed it. The victim collapsed and faded to nothing. That is not strength, Nira said, her voice steady despite her horror. That is cannibalism. You are destroying our own people. The weak deserve to feed the strong. This is how we survive in a hostile universe. No, David said, stepping forward. This is how you ensure that everyone dies alone. He extended his hand toward Kale. I'm human, and I'm offering to share my emotions with you willingly. Not because you're forcing me, but because I choose to help. Feel what that's like. Kale stared at David's outstretched hand as if it were a venomous snake. You would willingly give your life force to one of us? Why? Because Nira taught me that connection is stronger than fear. Because helping someone else survive makes me more human, not less. Through their bond, David felt Nira's love and gratitude, but also her terror that Kale might drain him completely. Instead, he focused on projecting the emotions he had experienced over the past months. The joy of forming a genuine bond with another being, the satisfaction of helping someone in need, the peace that came from no longer being alone. Kale reached out hesitantly and touched David's hand. The moment their skin made contact, the red glow around Kale flickered and began to change. David felt the alien's consciousness recoil from the unfamiliar sensation of freely given compassion. What is this? Kale whispered. The energy is clean, pure. This is what willing cooperation feels like, Nira said. David and I have formed a harmony bond. We share energy freely, and both of us become stronger because of it. The other Lumini in the circle moved closer, drawn by the change in their leader's energy signature. David could feel their curiosity and desperate hunger, but also something else. Hope. "Show them," David said to Nira. "Let them feel what we have together." Nira took David's other hand, and suddenly their bond opened fully to include everyone in the circle. For a moment, all the Lumini experienced what David and Nira shared: mutual care, respect, and the deep satisfaction that came from helping each other thrive. The effect was immediate and powerful. The angry red light filling the warehouse softened to gentle gold, and several of the Lumini began to weep with relief. "This is impossible," Kale said, but his voice had lost its edge of madness. "Humans cannot be trusted. They fear us, they hunt us. Some do," David admitted, "but others are willing to learn. Dr. Foster and her team are outside right now, not because they want to destroy you, but because they want to protect innocent people from being hurt. If you're willing to try cooperation instead of predation, they're willing to help you find a place in our world." Kale looked around at his followers, seeing the hope in their faces for the first time in months. "And if we refuse? If we continue as we have? Then you'll keep poisoning yourselves with stolen energy until you all go insane and die," David said bluntly. "Or Dr. Foster's people will hunt you down to protect humanity. Either way, your people become extinct. But if you choose cooperation," Nira added, "if you learn to form harmony bonds with willing humans, you can not only survive but help both our species evolve into something better." The standoff lasted for several long minutes while Kale wrestled with concepts that went against everything he had believed since arriving on Earth. Finally, he released David's hand and stepped back. "I will speak with your Dr. Foster," he said slowly, "but I make no promises beyond that." 6 months later, David stood in the community center that had been built in his old apartment complex, watching the newest group of human volunteers meet with Lumini refugees who'd been located by the government's expanding search efforts. The pilot program had grown beyond anyone's expectations as word spread about the benefits of harmony bonds for both species. Mrs. Rodriguez was there with her new Lumini partner, a gentle being named Lysa, who helped her manage her arthritis pain in exchange for the warm, nurturing energy that came naturally to the elderly woman. Beth had moved to the city permanently to help run the legal aspects of the program, working with a young Lumini lawyer who was learning human law. "The integration is proceeding better than we projected," Dr. Foster said, joining David near the observation window. "Crime rates in participating communities are down. Mental health services report fewer cases of depression and anxiety, and the Lumini are healthier than they've been since arriving on Earth." "What about Kale's group?" David asked. "Still adjusting but making progress. Kale himself has been working with our psychologist to understand the trauma that led him to believe violence was necessary. His harmony bond partner is a veteran who understands the effects of war on the psyche." David nodded, watching as Nira helped a nervous human woman meet her potential Lumini partner for the first time. The fear and uncertainty he saw in the woman's face was familiar, but he also saw the curiosity and hope that would eventually win out. A small hand tugged at his shirt, and he looked down to see a human child, maybe 8 years old, with a young Lumini boy beside him. "Mr. David," the human child said excitedly, "Ray showed me how to make light pictures. Watch." The two children held hands and concentrated, and suddenly the air above their palms filled with tiny stars that danced and swirled in patterns of pure joy. Other children gathered around them, human and Lumini alike, laughing at the beautiful display. "This is what the future looks like," Nira said, appearing beside David. "Children who grow up seeing cooperation as natural, bonds that form not from desperation but from choice." David put his arm around her and felt their harmony bond pulse with shared contentment. "Hard to believe it all started with a knock on my door at midnight." "The best changes often begin with the smallest gestures," Nira replied. "One person choosing to help another, one moment of compassion overcoming fear." Through the community center's windows, David could see the city lights twinkling in the distance, and he knew that in apartments and houses throughout the area, humans and Lumini were sharing their lives, their emotions and their hopes for tomorrow. The lonely programmer who had once lived in isolation had become part of something much larger, a bridge between species, a testament to the power of choosing connection over fear. As the evening's introductions wound down, David and Nira prepared to head home to the apartment that had become the center of the first successful human Lumini community on Earth. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as the program expanded to other cities, but tonight they would share the quiet satisfaction of work well done and lives well lived. The midnight knock that had changed everything had led not just to survival, but to the beginning of a new chapter in the story of two species learning to thrive together among the stars.